When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the vehicle owner's manual for important feature limitations and information.
Empire.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Last Man Standig podcast. Yes, I'm your host, Ben Standig, and I cover the Washington Commanders for The Athletic. Happy Labor Day weekend. I can literally not believe today's September 1st. I'm aware of how our calendar works, and I'm, that after August comes September. But yeah, no, just hearing September, I can feel the temperature dropping 20 to 30 degrees and not good. Of course, though, the start of September means that the NFL season is right around the corner, and the Washington Commanders are officially now heading into their Week 1 matchup at Tampa Bay against the Buccaneers. We'll have plenty of coverage about that this week, both here on the podcast as well as in The Athletic. On this episode, I'll drop in a couple notes at the top from what we last heard from Dan Quinn and Jayden Daniels on Thursday. But my guest today, he's a returning champion, Dalton Ross from Entertainment Weekly, noted Commanders fan, former host of the Surviving Snyder podcast. Dalton, I got to know through his coverage of one of my favorite shows, Survivor, and as well as numerous other articles and conversations he produced for Entertainment Weekly. And he is a tremendous interviewer. I have been out, he's interviewed me on his former podcast. I've listened to him. And since my NFL agent survey just came out last week, and it's weird for me to sort of like talk about it myself, I thought, you know what? What if I could get Dalton to come on, interview me on my own podcast about both that a survey, but also the season ahead. We're right here, and Dalton's got a lot of good thoughts. So that's what we did. We flipped the script. Dalton interviewed me more or less. I go on everybody else's podcast and show as the guest. Why not do it here for once? So that's what we did. Of course, it was a back and forth conversation on all the various topics. Again, the agent survey, a lot of focus with the Commanders parts in there for sure. And then we got into the season as a whole, questions, concerns, hopes, dreams, all that stuff with regards to this season. So that's going to be a lot of fun for you guys, I think, here in a few moments on the Last Man Standing podcast. You know the drill. You can find it on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you do your podcasting. As I said, as you guys now know, the previous podcast, Standing Room Only, is officially dormant. So we're moving forward here as well as on The Athletic. Again, I have the agent survey up. If you have not had a chance to look at it, definitely appreciate it if you did. And if you have yet to subscribe to The Athletic, you can get a great deal right now. There's multiple options to go to. You go click on one of my articles and you will see them right there. All right, before we get to Dalton, a couple of things. First off, you can always hit me up on Twitter at Ben Standig, X, whatever you want to call it. Dalton is at Dalton Ross. Let me say that. But as I said, Dan Quinn and Jayden Daniels spoke on Thursday, as did assistant GM Lance Newmark, the final day of practice for Washington before the holiday weekend. Everybody went off and did their own thing. I'm sure some stayed in town. Others went elsewhere, whether back home or on vacation or whatever it might be, because it's the last opportunity to get away before all of this chaos that we call the NFL season begins. And Quinn said that he encouraged everybody, including Jayden Daniels, to literally get away from football, clear your head, get ready for what's to come. Daniel said he wasn't quite sure what he was going to do, but he also said, look, it's kind of hard to just completely separate yourself from football. And, look, he said he was not going to the LSU game this weekend against USC, but I'm sure he'll be watching. And, you know, speaking of Jayden Daniels, this is sort of off topic, but the team put up a video the other day. It was like Heisman history, and it had Jayden Daniels and Marcus Mariota together. Both guys have won, of course, the Heisman trophy. And there was a lot of questions about, the history of the Heisman, whether it was, the year that they won or other years or whatever. And, through the years of covering sports, I've often found that it's sort of surprising how often the people that we talk about all the time don't actually pay that much attention to the sport that they play, that they really don't have much sense of history. And I understand that's to some degree a young person thing always forever, but even within their own sport, and listening to Jayden Daniels talk about and Marcus Mariota try to answer these questions, it's really impressive that Daniels really does know a lot of the history here. I talked to former NFL quarterback EJ Manuel, who's now an analyst for ESPN, a college football analyst, and he was saying he had interviewed Daniels for Sirius XM some point over this calendar year, and that he really found Daniels to be a student of the game, both in terms of his craft, but also a knowledge of what's come before him. And I just think that, to me, stands out. It's just another example of how Jayden Daniels seems to be a little bit different than the average, hotshot rookie quarterback we see come in. There's obviously the physical tools, but there's a working mind up there that goes beyond just the sort of what he may have to do to get the job done at a given point. So I suppose wanted to mention that as well. Jayden Daniels also, after practice, spent time throwing the ball a little bit with Noah Brown, of course, Washington's newest wide receiver. Brown was there. He also spoke on Thursday, right before everybody got away. He's got that good size that we talked about 6'2". He's going to give them a red zone target, a blocking threat, and he's showed last year he can be a bit of a playmaker as well. So I think it's going to be a welcomed fit. Again, just like, and Dalton and I talked about this, it's not that, there is no, we can stop saying who's going to be wide receiver 2, but we can say that they have different guys who can do very specific skills that they have, and if Cliff Kingsbury can figure out when to use them and how to use them, it could be more effective than it may look on paper. Nonetheless, Daniels was like, hey, I've already worked with Terry McLaurin and the other guys for months. We're just getting here with Noah Brown. We got to get him up to speed. How much Noah Brown will play this week against Tampa, hard to say quite yet. I would imagine he will be active and they will get him on the field, but I would guess it'll be at least another, week or so before he's sort of fully integrated into the offense. Now, speaking of the offense, Brandon Coleman was back on the field the last couple of days of practice. Dan Quinn said that Coleman on Wednesday really did go through a full amount of the practice, and then on Thursday with the team put pads on, that he was back out there as well. And he said right before he talked to us, Quinn, on Thursday, he said that he had just talked to Coleman just to get an update. He said, hey, I asked him if he was being guarded about anything, and he said, no, man, I'm good to go. He felt strong. He felt good. So I'm pleased that we're leaving the camp spot in good health, and that's the goal that you want as the coach. I will be very interested to see if Coleman is ready to go as the left tackle. Certainly the momentum was heading in that direction before the shoulder and pec strain suffered right before the preseason opener. It had not been out there until this past week. He's a rookie. He's a third-round pick, showing promise and executing in real time in your NFL debut are very different things. So we'll see how practice goes this week if he is out there. Obviously, you have Cornelius Lucas and Andrew Wiley. Otherwise, having Coleman back is a significant deal at this point. You've got Trent Scott as the fourth tackle for now, but Coleman is the one who obviously has the best chance to play, if not start. So we'll see what happens in practice this week. As for Johnny Newton, this one still feels a little bit further away, but here's what Dan Quinn had to say about where Newton is. Quote, the part for Johnny, the change of direction, the speed is good. I think you'll probably see him back into practice reps coming up beginning into next week. And then we'll have a better estimation if he's ready to play, depending on how much practice he gets in. It's good that he's getting close. Of course, it's been now all summer since we've heard he would be close. He was, remember, activated off the PUP list the first day of training camp, but we were all like, whoa, that's kind of surprising that, we were expecting it to be a lot later. Well, it turned out it really kind of was a lot later, in that the soft tissue injury in his foot, derailed him on top of the recovery from the two surgeries on each foot for the Jones fractures. So we'll see where he's at. Now, obviously, they traded away John Ridgeway the other day, which means they are now thinner at defensive tackle. Fedarian Mathis would be the obvious primary backup to John Allen and Daron Payne. Now, good news is Washington did sign veterans Carlos Watkins and Sheldon Day to their practice squad. Watkins started 14 games for Dan Quinn in Dallas just a couple of years ago. He can play end and tackle. Day has been a sort of a reserve tackle for most of his career. So either way, they would have a fourth guy should Newton not be able to go. So not a huge concern there. Again, we can sit here and debate, is Carlos Watkins better, worse, or the same as a John Ridgeway? The point is just that, hey, they have some options there that they can use. They obviously don't want to overwork Allen and Payne. You obviously need them out in the field as much as reasonable, but I think there can be diminishing returns if they're playing an excessive amount of snaps. That's got to be a part of the reason why you drafted Johnny Newton. Of course, there's also the next year scenario should John Allen and his contract lead to the two-time Pro Bowler getting released, but that's a topic for next year, or at least later on. So anyway, those are some of the, I think, the major notes here for them on the injury front. Now, in terms of what else to consider this week, actually, I don't know. Do we care about team captains? I've always thought team captains in the NFL were kind of a weird bit because, especially when there's like a rookie at quarterback. Certainly, we all get it, right? If we get guys like Tress Way would be a special teams captain, and John Allen and Terry McLaurin on their sides of the ball, et cetera. Dan Quinn said that we're not going to do that. He says we're not going to have the year-long captains. And honestly, I don't really always know what that really means. Talk about locker room leadership, whether somebody is a captain or not. If they're a vet, you assume that they are going to be a voice there. And yeah, there's the technical aspects on game day of sometimes, coin toss or what have you. But anyway, Dan Quinn said, no, we're not doing that. We're going to do weekly team captains, which I imagine, if I had to guess, would be, say, they're not playing Seattle, but if they did, like Bobby Wagner would be a team captain in that game. I can see the former Cowboys, Dorrance Armstrong, Tyler Biadasz, being team captains when they play Dallas and so on, right? Maybe it's like a hometown scenario. If somebody's, from a certain part of the country, maybe they're the team captain that week. Now, Quinn said that they would have permanent team captains should they make the playoffs. So lofty goal. And if they do, we'll see team captain selected for the duration there. Again, I don't really think these things are that big of a deal. And honestly, I think I would have been slightly disappointed if Jayden Daniels had been named a captain off the bat, which isn't to say that he's not going to be a team leader and not a mature kid. It's just like, if the general notion of being a captain means you're sort of a leader already, I don't know how the rookie is doing that. But okay, doesn't matter. Dan Quinn's eliminated that worry, so we don't have to deal with that at this point. So those are just a couple of quick notes here on the Commanders. Again, we'll have more podcasts next week leading into game one, including we'll have a preview on the Bucs as well. So now I want to get into my conversation with Dalton Ross. As I said, we flipped the script. Dalton is interviewing me about the agent survey that I just did, as well as previewing the Commanders 2024 season. So let's do that right now here on the Last Man Standig podcast.
Hey everyone, Bram Weinstein here, play-by-play voice of the Commanders and founder of Empire Media, and we are so excited that Ben Standig has come along and joined us with Empire with his awesome podcast, Last Man Standig. I wanted to tell you about our two other primary shows, and selfishly, mine, the Bram Weinstein Show, which can be heard on ESPN 630 in DC from 11 to 12, but then becomes a podcast that goes up immediately at 12 o'clock, 5 days a week. Some of the best Commanders and DC sports coverage you're going to get. So if you love Ben's show, check out mine as well. And also don't forget to check out the John Keim Report from Empire Media as well, the ESPN Insider. We are bringing you the best Commanders coverage all season long. Be sure to subscribe to all three of our Empire shows, Last Man Standing, The Bram Weinstein Show, and the John Keim Report.
All right, as I promised, Dalton Ross from Entertainment Weekly is joining me here at Dalton Ross on X, Twitter. Dalton's been on many times. He's a known Commanders fan, thinker, and all of the above. He's also a world-class interviewer. I'm not just saying that. He's interviewed literally everybody. He told me he just interviewed the Avengers. We know he's all over with Jeff Probst and Survivor. And now he's going to interview me about my survey and the Commanders. I'm a little nervous, but also I get interviewed by everybody else except for my own podcast, and I don't know. Let's just do it that way. So that's what we're doing, Dalton. So you get to grill me. Be nice. First of all, how you doing? We're heading into week one. You feel like you got your reps in during training camp?
I just want to say a few things. I want to say this first off. I'm to blame. If you were hoping to watch this interview, I shut down the video component of it. On Ben was hoping to do a little Zoom camera action, but as a guy who did 8 years of national radio on Sirius XM, I do have a face for radio, so I shut that S down immediately. Also, Ben, listen, I feel like I'm not doing your pod justice if I don't do what you've been doing on all your recent pods, which is talk about the new feed. Geez, I mean, how many times you have to keep reminding people about your new feed? If they're already listening to you, you're doing it. You got Bram doing it on your interview. Of course, it's his company. I understand that. I'm listening to this all the time. Like, geez, we get it already. But I did have one question. Okay, yeah. So your last pod was Standig Room Only, right?
Correct.
Like, really good name pun. Love it. Your new pod is Last Man Standig. Another really solid A+ name pun. And coming from Entertainment Weekly, that's what we used to be known for, was all our headline puns. So, I'm a professional when it comes to this. So here's my question for you, Ben.
Uh-oh.
Last Man Standing, when you came up with it, when you got the new pod with Bram on the new feed and you need a new name, did you have to brainstorm that? Or was that one of the ones that you originally considered for Standing Room Only?
It is the name of my fantasy football team in the league I've had forever. I didn't to show how not so bright I am. I didn't come up with that name originally. It would have been better from the start. I came up with it years into it. So yeah, it was, I had the backup ready, I guess you could say. I pondered some other ones, like, with the Elton John song, Still Standig.
Good. We're dating ourselves with that one a little bit though, aren't we, Ben? Let's be honest.
Well, it also would have been good in terms of I switched podcasts, but
can I tell you something? I did my fantasy draft last night, and this is a sort of a family league. It's all Commanders fans except for one, my brother-in-law, who's a Giants fan because he's from Jersey, so we'll let it slide. But I want to tell you the one rule we have in our fantasy league, and I encourage everyone else to adopt this rule. Our rule is you're not allowed to draft any Dallas Cowboy players. None. No CeeDee Lamb, no Dak Prescott, no Cowboys players, because we don't want to ever be in a position to have to root for a member of the Dallas Cowboys. And I stand by that rule.
Well, the good thing is, you can get away with not drafting Dak. There's a lot of quarterbacks. CeeDee Lamb, okay. They don't have any good running backs, from a fantasy perspective or really any perspective. And, I don't know, tight end, whatever. So, yeah, I think it's a reasonable rule. I mean, yeah, if you're going straight fandom, knock yourself out. I have hoard out a long time ago. I've put aside those worries and concerns, but I've been there. I feel your pain if you have to do that.
Yeah, we do it every year, and then I'm the commissioner. So if someone auto drafts a Cowboys player, I immediately go in and take them off the team. It's great. I love the power. It's amazing.
What if there's some weird scenario where somehow the only starting quarterback available, you need one, is the quarterback of Dallas? You just nope, you can't do it.
Nope. Go get yourself some Taysom Hill or something. Is he still considered a quarterback, or is he I
Sure.
have no idea. I heard about some possible reclassification of him on the Yahoo leagues, and you could also draft him as a tight end. I don't know what that's all about.
All right,
Listen,
so be ready.
That's all a bunch of nonsense. It's incredible to be here. You're such a celebrity in my household, Ben, not only for your podcast, your incredible reporting, but your appearances, of course, twice a week on Kevin Sheehan's radio show. Love hearing you there. By the way, the Commanders need to stop drafting players that went to Kevin Sheehan's kids' schools. Can they do that? Like in light of the trade the other week, just stop drafting, especially wide receivers that went to school with the offspring of Kevin Sheehan. If a player went to a school at all connected to either Kevin Sheehan or the son of Dan Snyder, they should not be drafted by this organization.
Well, also, if we're talking pure wide receivers, their last names can't start with D-O and end in son.
Yeah. Don't
Johnson first. Now this, I don't think I realized that he had a kid that went to Penn State, but okay. Yeah, sure.
I think he did. I'm pretty sure he did.
Sure. Why not?
He's 0 for 2 on that one. All right, listen, I have a baseball cap here. I'm going to put on backwards. I'm going to go Dan Quinn style for this interview. Just channel my inner DQ.
Let me ask you this: in the last episode I did with Bram, I noticed in Bram's background he had a photo from him from 100 years ago with the backwards cap. Should this be a thing that, like, when say it's a fourth quarter, you need a rally, whatever side it is, that fans should turn the hat around and just go full D? The rally cap is going full DQ.
100p. And like, again, for men of a certain age, Ben, like back in like the early 90s, the backwards baseball cap was the thing. I could go into my room next door and there's a picture of me on a desk with a backwards baseball cap. Now it's from like 30 years ago. So, but it's there. It exists. I think that should be your new thing. Everyone has to have a backwards baseball cap.
I like it. I mean, everybody's wearing a hat. Do it this way makes total sense. I'm with you. I like it.
All right. So listen, Ben, I'm flipping the script. I'm turning the tables on you today because you are the interviewer who always has your guests on and is peppering them with questions, trying to get a salacious quote out of them, no doubt, for your reporting that can go viral. But I want to talk to you about a few things, especially your big new agent survey that you did. And for anyone that has, now I'm going to sound like Kevin Sheehan again. For anyone that has not read this, go to The Athletic. So what does he always say? It's like, subscribe. It's totally worth it. He always says it's totally worth it.
It is right now. I don't know when it goes to, but right now it's $1 a month.
Look at that.
For a year. Or if you're into wanting like the New York Times and all the New York Times stuff, so The Athletic, Wirecut, or whatever, it's $1 a week for a year. So I'm not telling you how to spend your money, but if you want to get in, it's a good time to do that.
I thought it was free if you subscribe to the New York Times. I subscribe to the New York Times. I get it free. I'm just telling you.
The Athletic, I mean.
Yeah, I get The Athletic for free.
Yeah, well, I'm saying if you do it for $1 you get all their publications, all the games, everything.
Wow, love it. It's amazing. All right, so go do that. But anyway, you do this agent survey. Before we talk about it, give me like the history of the survey. When did this start? Why did this start?
So I got to The Athletic in 2019, and The Athletic was kind of like the Wild Wild West back then. You know, there were two guys who were out in Silicon Valley, venture capitalists, who were trying to start this site, and the gist being obviously it was going to be a subscription rather than an ad model, which makes a lot of sense and blah 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 because of this ad model doesn't work, leads to clickbait, all that stuff. Anyway, so when I came in, I was like, okay, I feel like not that I need a gimmick, but I feel like I needed a thing because everybody kind of, like I said, it was the Wild Wild West. You could kind of do whatever you wanted. And I knew like I'm not like a film breakdown guy. Plus we had Mark Bullock at the time to do that. And I knew I wasn't going to get like all the insight from the building because, Bruce Allen and Jay Gruden, didn't have much to do with me at that stage.
Damn good culture.
Damn good culture. But at that point, I'd already kind of had spoken with a couple of agents, and there's tons of agents out there. Some of them have multiple players on the team, and some of them have one or two clients, period. And sometimes they would land here and you get to talk to them. And I thought, getting to talk to the agents, you kind of realize, obviously they represent the players, and that's a side that we don't always hear from. But then they also talk to the team, right? They're obviously talking and negotiating contracts with the team or whatever else they're having to navigate. They're also talking to not just this team, they're talking to all the teams. Because I know we get caught up in training camp that, like we just went through with the cuts. oh my God, I can't believe they just, they let this guy go. What about that? Well, that's because we're looking at them. If you look at all the 31 teams, this guy might just be pedestrian or whatever. So in terms of like how teams work and function, they see it all, right? So I just thought that perspective was pretty interesting. It was not being represented anywhere. And so that's kind of the genesis of how it started. And originally it started asking questions like more about them. Also like what goes into being, what kind of choices are you making when it comes to recruiting players, or how do you go about your process? It's evolved more into just questions about different topics within the league. Obviously, I ask a lot of questions about the front offices in the league. So that's kind of the evolution of it. And yeah, I mean,
It's taking off like wildfire, Ben, like wildfire.
well, I'll just say I know that sometimes you're doing this, you think you're like writing into the void. But I remember there was one notable agent who I somehow met once, and when I said who I was, he was like, "Oh, next time get me in the survey." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
Well, that's what I noticed. I noticed that last year you had 23 agents, and this year you have 31. So you have officially hit standing room only capacity, my friend.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. So some years, it just sort of depends, like the circumstances of when I'm asking the questions. And this time I had a little more time. The survey was originally supposed to come out like sort of right at the beginning of training camp, and for reasons not having to do with me, it was delayed. So with that extra time, I just kind of kept going. And yeah, no. So yeah, I got a good amount. I try to break it up. I try not to have the same people every year. I try to have different people come in, as well as like some people who are at the top of the profession and other people who are just for kind of figuring it out and just kind of get going. So it's not just the same perspective over and over again.
All right. Well, I want to ask you about some of these questions that you asked them about in the survey. And then I want to talk some Washington Commanders 2024 football with you and get your take on stuff. Some hot takes, scorching hot takes served up by Ben Standig.
Let's do it.
But first off, in the survey. So here are some of my takeaways. And you ask people, you start in the survey, you basically say, what's the best run franchise? And then you kind of flip the other side. You say, what's the most unstable franchise? So here's the big headline for Commanders fans. All right, they got no votes in the best run franchise, but only one vote in the most unstable franchise, which has to be considered a massive win. Consider that last year, Ben asked the question after the turnover, if the Commanders are no longer the NFL's most unstable franchise, who is? So he basically was saying that it's just a given that they're the most unstable franchise in the league. Now they only get one vote for the most unstable franchise. First off, what was the reasoning for the one vote, Ben? I'm curious. The one person, you didn't put that in there. Who is like, is that just like someone just like is so used to, it's like force of habit. They're so used to checking the Commander's box that they just did again.
I think that's right. I think they don't realize the war is over, kind of deal. They're
Yeah,
they're still hiding out. Don't realize things have changed. A little bit of that. I will say this. So the number one answer, I believe the Eagles and the 49ers each got 5 votes. But the actual number one answer in terms of what the most people said to me was, well, no, I take it back. For the most unstable, Carolina had 9, and the Raiders were the 8 or 7. Okay, but still the case. The number one response I got was, "Wow, this is a lot harder since I just can't pick Washington anymore." Like truly, I mean, people used to crush Bruce Allen all the time. For obviously, we understand why, and Dan Snyder goes without saying. And then, the Ron Rivera was up and down. People always said that, like the person, but questioned what was going on. So yeah, it's notable, obviously, in that regard. None of this means that they're going to win the Super Bowl in anytime soon. But at the same time, it shows like one of the aspects of all this is like, look, the agents will just take money at some point. They'll advise their players, whatever the scenario is. If at some point the best money, take it, especially if it's not your high profile guy who can kind of do whatever he wants. But when it came to Washington, it was always like you either had to overpay to get that player, or the agent might have had to hold his nose to truly advise his client to go there. And now that's no longer the case. And you can see that perfectly in the actual front office. Adam Peters, I had forgotten about this, but he, in the previous 3 years, he either was outright or tied for the next GM to watch.
Yeah.
No chance he would have taken an interview here in any of those years. because of the chaos. Now he does, and it's just an example. I know that's not an agent situation per se, but that's an example of how things have changed and the importance of this. We always think of it in terms of like the draft and certain things, but if you don't have a good, if you don't have a good presentation, if they don't have a good feeling for you, it makes it that much harder. You have to pay more in some cases, or sometimes you just have no shot to get anybody. And that definitely is a difference. So again, yeah, they're not in the top best run yet, but I think, based on what we have seen so far, there's at least a chance that can happen if things, break their way.
Well, and we'll talk more about them in 1 second, but I also just want to highlight, you said Panthers 9 votes for most unstable, Raiders with 7. Is that all just ownership?
In both cases. So this question was about top to bottom. So because there's other questions like who had the best offseason and other things that are more specific to the front office. This is purely however you want to, I basically tell them, look, however you want to look at this, how do they treat the players? How do they treat the players' family? What about the facilities? When you call up to ask questions, how responsive, whatever it may be. So it's not just the parts that we typically talk about. And yeah, in that case, David Tepper for the Carolina Panthers and Mark Davis for the Raiders were the big culprits. I mean, in both of those teams, right? They've changed the coaches and the front office just, pretty recently, just in the last off season or so. So it's not those people. It is literally from the top down, and in large part because in both cases are just constant turnover, or Tepper really a lot of meddling. And I think it's a fair call especially for where things were last year. I think the Raiders obviously think they've got a bit of a home run with Antonio Pierce. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, I think in both cases it's kind of the same deal. There's just too much meddling or just too much wrong out of the ownership box.
I was talking to someone who's a massive 76ers fan, and he was just like saying how much they don't like Josh Harris.
Right.
And I was just saying that I can't explain. I was like, I can't explain to you how excited we are for Josh Harris, not because he's seen by us as the greatest owner in the history of professional sports, but you don't understand what we've been dealing with. Like, to us, he seems like the Messiah. And just to get to like an average owner that, sometimes you'll grumble about and sometimes you'll, be like, okay, cool with. It's like that for us is just a whole new world. And so the fact that when you hear about a David Tepper, throwing drinks on fans and stuff, it's just so nice that it's not us for once. So I want to continue that sort of in this next question, which is kind of linked a little bit. You asked agents which franchise had the best offseason. And the Commanders led the entire field with 8 responses, 8 out of 31. That's a really high percentage. Now, Ben, I got really excited when I saw that until I remembered that for years and years, I'm going to use air quotes, we owned the offseason.
Sure.
So why is this different?
No, I got a lot of people when I tweeted out something specific about that question. I'm like, oh, great, another win the offseason. That's not how this works. Well, okay, so when they were winning the offseason before, it was because Dan Snyder was signing Bruce Smith and Deion Sanders and these types of people to big names we're familiar with big contracts, and it made for good headlines. But whether they were older players on the end or it was too much money, or just like when they signed Adam Archuleta, they you let Ryan Clark go. When you bring in Deion, you let B Mitch go. When you put Darrell Green sort of on the back in the background, like these types of things were not good for building football, but they were exciting and made headlines. The difference here is that certainly Jayden Daniels is a factor in this, no question, but people weren't going, they won the offseason because they signed, even a guy like Bobby Wagner or Olamide Zaccheaus. No, they're doing it because of Adam Peters and Dan Quinn. I mean, Dan Snyder was already been gone, but this was the first offseason where it really felt that he was gone. So bringing in Adam Peters, who again, he's in this survey 3 years in a row was either outright the winner or tied for first for future GM to watch. And Dan Quinn, yeah, look, there's some people won't forget the Super Bowl they blew against New England, and obviously things petered out there in Atlanta. In order to lose a Super Bowl, I would argue you had to get there. So there's that, and his reputation as a connector, as a guy who's like as a human being does a really good job of getting people to buy in. I know people wanted an offensive guy. I get that for the most part, and he's not that. But that's why this is different. I mean, again, none of this means it's going to completely turn around, but to your point about like you can't understand how somebody's not happy with Josh Harris. Like everything is professional now. Like the rationale and the decision making choices they're making about fixing the building, something that was ignored for forever. And then just even like the other day, I was getting into this argument with somebody in the media about this, like the trading of John Ridgeway, trading Ridgeway in a 7th for a future 6th. And it was like, well, what's the point of that? Isn't Ridgeway going to help you more, especially if Johnny Newton's out? And I'm like, yeah, but the point is that they're not really, they'll do whatever they can to win games this year, but they're not going to invest in winning games this year. They're going to invest in the future. And sure, it may not seem like a lot, but they now have a 6th-round pick instead of a 7th. And if you look at the trade charts, assuming that teams still go with that to a degree, a 6th is better than a 7th. You take a couple 6s, pair with a 4th, now all of a sudden you can get a 3rd. And maybe you can't do that if you don't have that. But Peters going that extra step. I just don't think that was something that was happening here a lot because everything was just in the here and now. There was no forward thinking. So I think this is an example of like how this is a better group and why. I can't say this is why all the agents thought this, but at the same point, there's a lot of like this belief in Adam Peters in particular, and that's why this winning the offseason is different than in the past.
Ones. Listen, it can't be any worse, right? I mean,
God.
hey, unless do we have a 2nd-round pick we can trade for TJ Duckett again? Is that something we can do? Because I'd be interested in Trunk candidate. Is he available still? All right.
I mean, like I'm not saying like look at me, but like I obviously I don't root for this team anymore. It was the one I grew up. You can see
you're wearing a burgundy shirt right now, man.
Well,
Ben Standig can say I don't root for this team.
It's a Vegas thing, but
it's burgundy.
But you can see it if you've seen my videos. Behind me is a football. I got that for my bar mitzvah. It was signed by the '83 team, the one that lost in the Super Bowl to the Raiders. And if God forbid the house goes on fire, I'm grabbing Lenny some clothes and that. So my point is though that people have heard me say this. I bailed on my fandom way before I did this. When Archuleta was the last one for me because it told me they were not serious about winning. So I wasn't going to invest my time or money. I'd watch the games, but I'm not investing emotion or money into this, and that was forever ago, let alone just the last couple of years. So I feel your pain, and I got out in front of it.
And I was at that Super Bowl against Marcus Allen in head-to-toe camouflage Riggo's Rangers gear. And if anyone that knows what that is, you've just dated yourself alongside me. All right. One last Commanders-related thing and then I want to hit you with some other questions from your survey. You have a lot of sort of front office questions. You had the best talent evaluator. Adam Peters got 3 votes in that. Everyone will want to know. You have which GM or front office leader do you trust the most? Adam Peters got 2 votes there. You also have who is the best overall GM. Now, Adam Peters, you can't grade him yet on that. So my question to you is, next year when you do this survey, does Adam Peters break into that list?
Yeah, I mean, these types of questions are not exactly like it's not scientific, right? The people aren't. I'm actually curious about you because you've done surveys over the years. I'm curious about your method. I typically like to do this where I don't prep them in advance. We talk on the phone, and like people who've done it multiple years know at least some of the questions because some of them are repeats. But I just like to ask them, hey, here's this. What do you think? So they're kind of doing a lot of it off their cuff, but it's off the cuff based on their own experiences in dealing with these situations. So success has a lot to do with it, right? I mean, if you're not winning, then no matter how good people think you are, you're not going to get the same kind of credit. So if they win next year, or if they win this year, or at least there's clear momentum, sort of like the way when Michael Jordan said about the Bullets back in the day with Chris Webber and Juwan Howard, this is the team to watch. Therefore, they got a lot of momentum. If that's how people are feeling about Jayden Daniels, et cetera, then Adam Peters is probably going to be somewhere in the top handful. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of good, whether it's John Schneider with Seattle or Howie Roseman with the Eagles or Brett Veach in Kansas City. There's a lot of, good GMs or ones who have a good reputation. But I think if they have the forward momentum, I think he's in that list. I mean, because even last year, he was getting votes outside of the one to watch category because he was that well-respected. Heck, at this point, look, he wasn't the GM in San Fran, but whenever we talk about somebody on San Fran like Brandon Ayuk, Adam Peters drafted him. That's like, I think we can say that and feel confident about it to a certain degree, even if maybe Kyle
Except if it's Trey Lance. Put that on Shanahan. That's
Well,
Shanahan.
honestly, in that case, I do kind of feel when it comes to the quarterback, you do
I
kind of have to
know.
feel that it's that the head coach in that case. But yeah, so I think Adam Peters across the board, it's been like I'm not looking for anybody to say, "Hey, this guy stinks." I can't find anybody who would though. Like, I mean, everybody's pretty effusive in their praise, and now he actually has the job. So again, as long as they show positive momentum, I bet he's probably in the top 5 somewhere next year.
Let me ask you something about, you mentioned the questions you asked him. Now, I did notice some. As like any good reporter, Ben, I do my research. And I notice you have this question: which GM or front office leader do you trust most? Now, in 2022, you also asked, whom do you trust the least? I did not see that question on this year's survey. Why?
Well, I had mentioned before the Athletic was a little more the wild, wild west, and the New York Times is not exactly the same way. And I think, obviously, when you ask that question, who do you trust the least, it can lead to some people throwing in their personal agendas. I do try to look, no matter what it is, positive or negative, right? It can be a personal agenda, like for that future one to watch. I'm sure that some of them are picking a guy who they have a really good friendship with or want to succeed and they're trying to help the guy person out. But in my, I try to pay attention enough to be like, okay, that seems a little too agenda driven-y kind of stuff and weed that out. But I think the Athletic or the New York Times is kind of like, I don't know we want to go there. So I did ask the question, but we did not include it in the story. I don't even know honestly what the exact total of questions we had. I bet there's at least 10 questions that I asked and didn't make the story. So it's not just
sure.
that.
Yeah.
It just for a variety of reasons, they just, whether it was space or just the answers weren't good, or in this case, I just don't think they wanted to go overly negative in that regard. But that's why leaving in at least the unstable franchise, again, that one is more broad than just the front office, but it kind of connects a little bit to that. So yeah.
No, I agree. And I do see, while I want the T, if I'm a reader of Ben Standig's column, I want the T, but I also see your point is super valid that it could just be agents having an axe to grind. Right. They thought their player was going to be re-signed by someone he wasn't. They're sour grapes. So
you are based up in the near whatever it's called, MetLife Stadium,
where the Jets
play. So in the unstable category, the New York Jets received 3 votes. I tried, if it was like the winner of the category, I tried to include like 2, and then everybody else kind of just went with 1 if I had, So the Jets had 1 quote.
Oh my God, it's so good. This quote is so good.
Well, if you have it in front of you, you can go ahead and read it because
I'd have to find it.
Oh, it's okay.
Great.
So basically, it just had to do with how it's an unstable organization, that it's in disarray, that they've tried to make Aaron Rodgers a team player, but look, he's skipping training camp. He's not that guy. It was 1 quote. You would think I wrote a 4,000 word story on how much the Jets suck for the amount of grief I'm getting. I got people sliding into my DMs on Twitter and Instagram. The hatchet job. I'm like, dude, it's 1 quote. I haven't heard from a single Panthers or Raiders fan, and maybe that says something about where their franchises are at. But like, oh my God, people are outraged. And the funny thing is, to your point before about who do you trust the least, the Jets have been in that category probably almost every year. Like, there are a couple of people in that front office that some of these agents are just not into. And like I said, it'd be one thing if it was just one person. It's not. And some of the people who said the negative things those years weren't even in the survey this year. So look, I'm not here to say that the Jets are turned it around or they're a complete mess. But at the same time, boy, 1 quote, and you would have thought I wrote an entire book on the Jets.
The Jets seem like they should be a complete mess, but they've drafted well. You look at Sauce, Brees, and Garrett, and so they've drafted well. And if they hadn't hit on those 3 picks, I think they'd be in a world.
Generally, people like their GM Joe Douglas. Like, it's not so much him; it's just the whole atmosphere. Look, the Aaron Rodgers thing is a good example. They brought this guy in who, obviously, Aaron Rodgers is a great player historically, but he's clearly doing his own thing. And when you give somebody that much power, it can lead to some issues. And I think that's a lot of where this stems from.
Yeah, especially when you have a young roster with a lot of those young draft picks. All right, I got a few quarterback questions I want to hit you with. You asked the agents, what average annual value would 3-time Super Bowl MVP Patrick Mahomes receive if he were a free agent on the open market? And you gave him under 60 million, 60 million, 70 million, 75, or 100 or more. 13 out of 31, I guess, said 70 million. 6 said 100 million or more. How much would you pay Patrick Mahomes if you were a GM and he was on the open market?
Well, I didn't
What's your
give,
ceiling?
so I didn't give them any parameters. I just
Oh,
said give
really?
me a thing, and they went where they went because I didn't want to, because also like, on the one hand, on a very practical level with the salary cap, yeah, it's kind of hard to give one player. This isn't the NBA where even that's tough, but okay, you can probably get away with it a little bit easier. You can't do that here. So some of them went on their own north of 100, and their basic rationale was, look, the salary cap just keeps escalating. It's not going to slow down. And as we just saw with like Deshaun Watson or all the time, you can manipulate the salary, you can manipulate the contract a couple years out and keep moving money around and the salary cap real and all that. But in his case, it is a matter of, is he a one of one? I mean, arguably he is. I mean, the Chiefs lost Tyreek Hill. Their wide receivers last year were garbage, right? I mean, Travis Kelce's not a wide receiver. It's not like they have some dynamic running back, and yet Mahomes does what Mahomes does because he is that much of a difference maker. Winning is everything. So if to have him, I don't know what the number. I mean, it sounds insane and probably is, but 100 million may not be insane.
I would do it.
Yeah. I mean, if you put Mahomes on, and it's sort of like how we talk about the NBA with maybe not 40-year-old LeBron, but like you put LeBron on the team, that team is automatically a title contender.
Yep.
I mean, if you put Mahomes on this is not about Jayden Daniels, but if you put Mahomes on the Commanders right now, I take my chances that they're going to win the NFC East.
Absolutely. I would do it. I would do 100 million. You brought up Deshaun Watson. Taking all the off the field stuff out of it, is this so far the Browns contract the worst contract ever given in NFL history? I mean, he's I think was the most inaccurate quarterback last season. I think his QBR is the lowest in the league since he moved over to Cleveland. Is this the worst contract ever given out at this point?
Well, plus they traded a truckload of picks. He wasn't just a free agent. They had to trade a lot of stuff to get him. So they double dipped on that. I mean, it's got to be way up there. And the thing with Cleveland is, they're the one NFL team that essentially did the process. And I wrote about this when Josh Harris, before he came in, about how the Browns kind of did this. And if you look at what happened, it kind of worked everywhere else. I mean, they have really built up their team. They have one of the better defenses. Obviously, Myles Garrett helps, but they have a really good offensive line. They have a lot in place. I mean, look, last year they made the playoffs with Joe Flacco, who, God bless Joe Flacco, but Joe Flacco was nowhere, and he came in and was able to, because he has a lot of help around him, end up having a good year. So yeah, I think the fact that it's bad on its surface and then bad that they actually brought him into a situation that was pretty good and it hasn't gotten them anywhere. So yeah, this is a huge year, I think, for them in terms of that real, like if he doesn't have a good year this year and they don't get at least to the playoffs and then some, that's going to be even worse. It's going to look even worse than it has right now.
This is one of the times where it actually makes you believe that karma is real. Like his performance for both him and that team since he went there is like, oh, maybe karma actually is a thing. Maybe it's not just like, it's unbelievable. All right. You asked all the agents, assess the Falcons quarterback situation after they signed Kirk Cousins to a 4-year, $180 million contract, only to draft his future replacement, Michael Penix Jr., with the 8th overall pick. I'm going to rephrase this into a different question for you, Ben. Who's the bigger loser in this situation? Kirk Cousins, who lost out on a top 10 draft pick weapon on either offense or defense that could have helped him in trying to get this title before he retires, or Michael Penix, who could now sit behind Kirk Cousins potentially for multiple years?
Well, I'm obviously right. The immediate focus was, wait, what are you doing? You just signed Kirk Cousins. You gave him a ton of money. He's, getting up there in age. So clearly, it's not like you got to get going with him. So why are you doing that? But I think the answer is actually Penix, and it's the answer because of the same reason that I have the issue. If they had done the exact same thing but drafted 21-year-old JJ McCarthy or whatever he is, 2021, it still would have been weird. But I'd been like, okay, it gives McCarthy, who all the evaluators told me at least he needed more time. Obviously, he's going to miss the year with the injury, unfortunately, but he needed more time. That would be one thing, right? Because now if he sits a couple years, he's like the same age that Jayden Daniels kind of is now. Okay, you would still have the issue if you didn't give Kirk Cousins a weapon, but we know quarterback's super important. So, okay. But Penix is older than Jayden Daniels, who's already 23. he's had injury history. So by the time, if Cousins plays 2 years and then they bail, he'll be, basically almost 26 or will be 26. And not that that's not prime years, but you know, you're not able to go play. He's already coming in late. So I think to some degree Penix, but I thought the most interesting answer that somebody gave that kind of ties it in to sort of both of them is, we always think about the Green Bay, right? Green Bay has had, they draft Rodgers with Favre there. They draft Jordan Love with Rodgers there. But in both cases, Favre and Rodgers were already gods there. That there was nobody was going, well, get them out of here, start this guy we don't know about. Kirk Cousins showed up 8 seconds ago, and I'm sure there are a lot of people going, really? Like, as good as his stats are, it's not like he's been, we all know we've all had the conversation about Kirk Cousins, what level he is. So here you bring in this guy who has no connection to the fan base. You draft the young guy. The young guy is always going to be the more interesting one. Like, look at Sam Howell. He was a 5th-round pick that people wanted to just, make a statue out of him before he did anything just because of the possibility. So I think, like, I'm still saying Penix, but in terms of, like, why the situation is so weird, I think that is such a big factor. And I thought that was a smart way to look at it. That, what's the buy-in? We're just assuming Kirk Cousins will be fine and people will care. But, they could, I don't know what their schedule is. They could start 1-3 and people go, hey.
It's just interesting because we'll see how it turns out for the franchise, but at least at this point, it just seems like a raw deal for both quarterbacks involved, right? It's like a bummer for both of them. Last one I want to do here before we then start to talk some Commanders. We'll take people behind the scenes a little bit. As in my job as editorial director at Entertainment Weekly, I got some access, Ben. I got some access to stuff, and that includes getting early screeners of TV shows, which included getting early screeners of Hard Knocks. So I would watch the Hard Knocks New York Giants offseason, and then I would sort of text Ben, like, that morning before it aired and be like, oh, there's some, I think I told you when, like, that stuff about the Jayden Daniels, and they're talking about, like, oh, yes, I'd move up to draft Jayden Daniels, and
right.
The owner's kids saying, take Jayden Daniels and all that stuff. So I watched it, but I didn't really follow a lot of the Hard Knocks sort of, I don't know if it's reporting or reaction. So I was really taken aback in your survey when you asked people what were your thoughts on the Hard Knocks series. And it seems like almost to a person, all the agents were like, wow, the Giants look bad. Like, I don't know if any team's ever going to do it this way or do that again because they did not come off well. Is that a sentiment shared by people outside the agent community? And do you think the Giants look bad? And will teams push back against doing an off-season Hard Knocks? Because this is something that actually impacts all football fans as viewers.
Yeah. So this was probably the one question that I was most surprised by the answer. I mean, certainly some of the industry ones, I don't either have a good feeling for. I don't, I'm not like, oh, there's no way it's going to go this way. I liked the Hard Knocks a lot. I always liked the GME offseason front office part of an NFL calendar, probably even more than the games a lot of times, especially when it's been the games we've been watching. So I thought it was really good, but at the same point, yeah, it was good because we were getting to see a lot. And some agents said, and it's reflected in the story, hey, I thought it was really cool. Fans get to see behind the scenes. And even for me, meaning an agent, sure, it's still fun to see because I know what's happening on the other end of that phone. So it's fun to see what's going on in the room. I think the problem for a lot of people was, we build up these football people as they're geniuses. Like, it drives me crazy when somebody gets called a genius. They're calling football plays, or in this case, drafting somebody or whatever. And then you see behind the curtains and they're having the same conversation that we're all having about these things. And I think that's probably on some level as much as any where some of the concerns came from or some of the allure gets, kind of scrubbed off is because it's not MIT. They're not splitting the atom. What do you think about this guy? What about that guy? I'm not saying this about any particular coach, but I remember years ago, and it really helped shape how I thought about covering these sports. They talked about coaches, and they said, look, here's the reality. Most of these coaches are just glorified gym teachers. They just, whatever it is, either they played in the league or they had the right connections, and they, instead of coaching at, BCC high school, they're coaching in the NFL. And I think that's important to realize in terms of, like, when you see them all get in a room and discuss, and I know some of this is like front office people, but, kind of all the same bucket to a certain extent. you know, you're seeing them in this room and you're like, wait, shouldn't they be having some Algonquin roundtable conversation or have some, you know, some Malcolm Gladwellian thoughts here to just, you know, to discuss what your running back they should draft, or should they pay Saquon Barkley? And then you're like, oh no, they're kind of not doing that. So I think it will impact how other teams think. I think that other teams, from what in other organizations I've talked to, would not be in favor of this kind of thing. They'll do like probably the regular Hard Knocks, which I've stopped watching because we've seen it now 100 times. Plus, every team does their own video that kind of gives you some of that. So this was the one that was most interesting, which is probably why it'll be the one that I'm going to guess doesn't happen again, or doesn't happen for more than a year. But yeah, I mean, you know, like I said, I liked it, but I understand why some people are like, that was not a good choice by them.
Was it, by the way, was it BCC where they found Greg Minuski? Is that where they poached him from as their defensive coordinator?
Come on, we have better standards.
Okay. All right. Listen, the survey's amazing. Everyone that hasn't read it should go check it out. I love it. It's one of my favorite things you do. But listen, I gotta, since you're wearing your burgundy shirt, I gotta hit you with some more Commanders on the field stuff. Season is starting soon. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put you through your paces. We're gonna play some quick rounds of my favorite game. I've made you do this on my podcast, Surviving Snyder, which we had until we survived Snyder and he sold the team. And it's called Commanders True or False. And I'm going to give you a statement, a Commanders related statement about this upcoming season, and you tell me if it's true or false and why. Okay?
Love it.
All right, here we go. True or false? Jayden Daniels will have the most touchdown passes among rookie quarterbacks this season.
I'll go false. You know, just in terms of like, it's not necessarily a stat that's solely based on the weapons around you, but obviously it's got to be some kind of factor. And if you look at Washington, you know, other than Terry McLaurin, I think the strength of their team is going to be the two running backs. Now they can catch passes, but you know, I can see that being more on the ground. Whereas, like, say with the Bears, you know, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, Cole Kmet's not a bad tight end. Like, they've got more options there. And even with Denver, just because of like Bo Nix and Sean Payton, that combination, like I can see them throwing it a fair amount. So now I'll go false. I mean, I think he'll have a good statistical year, but just for that specific stat, I'll probably go false. Plus, obviously, with him running the ball the way he can, you know, he may snipe some of his own numbers in the passing game by running the ball.
Yeah, I agree. And those are the two that I'd have definitely above him as well. Caleb's just, I mean, they're just stacked with talent over there in Chicago at the skill positions. All right. He says false for the first one. Let's go to our second one. True or false? Luke McCaffrey will have the second most catches among Commanders wide receivers this season.
Well, it'd be fun to say true, because that would mean that, you know, he's cracked the rotation, has a high role in it, and you know, you want to see some young talent, you know, emerge wherever it comes from. But I'm going to go false. You know, look, they have not shown us everything, of course, in practice, and certainly not in the preseason games. But even just in terms of like the practices, he's been like running with like the quote unquote second team, but really hasn't like didn't like feel like he was like cracking the first group. Now, even without Jahan Dotson gone, they've now bring in Noah Brown, and I just kind of think that between Diami, Noah Brown, and I just realized there's two Browns. So between Diami, Noah Brown, and Zacchaeus, plus Zach Ertz and the two running backs, I just think that McCaffrey's going to fall back in terms of his targets. I think the key for him is going to be, you know, at least say by the second half of the year, is he in the rotation and looking like he can give them, whether it's in the slot or outside, you know, be a guy that going forward they can feel good about being like one of their top three guys. But for this year, I'll say no. And again, I'm not saying he had a bad summer. I'm just saying it didn't feel like they were quite ready yet to put him high in the rotation.
See, I tried to trick Ben into a hot take there. I tried to get him to serve you guys up a hot take, and he wouldn't do it. He just wouldn't do it. He's going to give me Diami Brown, who's got like what, one reception over like 18 seasons.
It's hard if you said who's going to be second, because I sort of did a little bit of this the other day with Bram, not the exact thing, but like if you said who's going to be second,
yeah.
I mean, even if Diami has a good year, I don't know if he's catching a volume amount of passes. Maybe Zacchaeus, but like he had 10 last year. And Noah Brown got here yesterday, literally. So, yeah, I don't know.
It's a problem, man, or it seems to be a problem. I mean, I know that Dan Quinn likes to talk about, perception inside the building and outside the building, but the perception outside the building is that our receiving core is pretty weak and pretty soft. So well, maybe not soft's not the right word, but I don't mean soft in terms of intensity, but maybe in terms of production. Okay,
You know,
maybe that. Yeah.
you're a former NBA head, or maybe you still are technically, but
No, I'm
you used to.
not.
All
I
right.
used
Well,
to, yeah.
so I always one team I always liked from a construction standpoint was the Sixers team that went to the finals with Iverson.
Yeah.
They basically had Allen Iverson, they had Dikembe Mutombo monitoring the lane, and then you had complete role players who did specific things designed because of Allen Iverson. You had guys who didn't have to, who could be successful without the ball in their hands, but would play defense and the things to complement him. I kind of feel like that's what this room looks like, in that you have Terry, who's the main guy, and then after that you have a deep threat in Diame, you have the slot guy in Zacchaeus, you have the bigger blocker guy now in Noah Brown. If Cliff Kingsbury knows how to use them and can, and if he doesn't say to them, go be, if we had Jamar Chase and T Higgins and Tyler Boyd, go be that. If he says, okay, here's it, we need you to do this in this spot. If you do this, we'll be successful. If they can do that, then I think it can work. But if they try to ask them to do too much, more than just their good but limited broad skill sets, I think that's where the problem becomes.
All right, maybe this is a little bit related to what we were just talking about. True or false? Austin Eckler will have the most all-purpose yards by a Commanders running back this season.
I like where your head's at. I'm going to say no, but that's because I think Brian Robinson, I'm putting my chips down on him having a pretty big year. He, when they talk about like they want this team to be competitive and they want to have this aggressive mindset, like I don't know if there's going to be anybody on offense outside of like an offensive lineman who was going to have that more than Robinson. And he had over 30 catches last year. I think it just gets like sort of glossed over. Ever since he showed up, he's been a better pass catcher than I was led to believe. And like I said, I can see them, without that obvious second receiver, I can see them moving him outside at times, like motioning out of the backfield. So I'm going to go with Robinson. Now, that's not to say that I think Eckler won't have a good year. I just think like over the course of the year, they're probably going to try to limit his workload to get him through all the way. And as good as he has looked in camp, I do want to see what Eckler looks like against an actual defense, because there's obviously no tackling. So let's see what that looks like and how does he hold up physically. But he's looked good. But yeah, I think Robinson, to me, is poised to have a big year. So no, I'll go Robinson. I'm probably saying Eckler would have the most receptions, but yeah, probably that's the opposite of a hot take. But yeah, I'll go Robinson for the most yards.
I'm with you. And the thing about Eckler is I'm trying really hard, Ben. I'm trying to convince myself that last year with him was just about the injury, right? That's all it was. But listen, we've got so much data over the past few years or past decade or two about older running backs. And once they start to have that one down year, how often do they really come back? How often do they bounce back super strong? Even if you try and limit their usage, it's extremely rare, extremely rare. So he was not good last year. And was it just the injury? Will he come back? I don't know. Robinson, I have hopes that he's going to have a strong year as well. It is interesting what you said about, what were we led to believe about Brian Robinson when he came out of college? It was that, he's not really a pass catching guy, but he definitely will never fumble the ball. He never fumbled the ball once in college ever. Now he seems to be really good hands, and we've seen him put the ball on the ground, and he's gotten lucky a few times. Have you noticed that? Like maybe his knee was down, or maybe it fumbled out of bounds. That happened once or twice, and then he has actually had one or two actual legitimate fumbles, but he has not been that lockbox with the ball we thought he'd be. And he also, on the flip side though, seems to have much better hands than we thought he would have.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm generally, as you've heard me say, both in these public and probably private conversations, I generally tend to be a bit more cautious with my optimism with these things, especially around here where we've all seen the dark side for too long. But I am pretty bullish on Robinson. I don't think I'm worried about the fumbles, famous last words, if things go awry, don't remember this, but I'm not too worried about that. And like I said, I just think that to help protect Jayden Daniels, to help protect the tackles, And just to be, hey, we don't have as many pass catchers. I think giving him the ball a lot is going to be just a thing that makes a logical thing to do and a productive one. So as long as he's not getting stacked in the box, which, in theory could be a little more problematic when you don't have a ton of receivers to worry about. I think he's going to have a pretty good year. Eckler, to me, that's what if I just was go off of training camp, I'd be telling you, dude, go draft Austin Eckler high in your fantasy. I can't do that though, because I need to, like you, I need to see it. But I've seen enough to be like, okay, he looks pretty good. But we'll see if that makes last for 17 games.
Yeah. All right, a few more quick ones. True or false? Jayden Daniels will not miss a game due to injury in 2024. And this to me is the really interesting question, Ben, because obviously who can predict this? But this was one of the things that I know a lot of fans worried about when we heard about how amazing Jayden Daniels was. We saw those hits. They're like, I think you called them video game hits. And like, you ever seen that video with like the coins like coming out of him as he's like blasted by someone? Like it was a Bowser. I mean, like, this is a chief concern among a lot of fans. So true or false, Jayden Daniels will not miss a game due to injury in 2024. Make your prediction right now.
I feel like if I say he won't miss a game, I'm bucking the trend of what we see around the league where quarterbacks are kind of miss a game. And if I say he will, I feel like I'm like gonna, get scolded for like, how dare you put that out into the universe? Look, I just think, like I said, based on nothing about him, just the odds of how we are with quarterbacks, I probably miss a game. But the larger question as you're asking is he going to be able to avoid? Because even if like Sam Howell didn't miss games last year, despite getting hit 800,000 times, but clearly at some point you gotta you just start get a little bit gunshot. You could tell with Howell a little bit, like as the season went on, that he wasn't able to stay in the pocket as easily as he did before. Maybe he was throwing the ball a little bit quicker than he needed to in some spots. So hopefully he avoids those kinds of hits. So I'll say he misses a game just based on the average and the odds, but I'm going to stay optimistic that he doesn't take massive blows or enough to, like, he's good enough to get rid of the ball and hopefully avoids enough big hits that we don't have to worry about it on any kind of weekly basis.
Well, we saw, in that one preseason game, Dan Quinn yelling at him, get down, get out of bounds, stop running. So, I mean, we'll see whether that takes or not, because I think that's a major concern.
I thought that was fascinating. I am sure you did as well from the Entertainment Weekly standpoint that Dan Quinn goes with Top Gun and Animal House references to discuss Jayden Daniels. But just that it was the first time we've seen everything in this camp has been pretty hunky-dory. Everybody's happy. And this was the first kind of time we were like, he wasn't mad, Dan Quinn, but it was a little like,
yeah.
I'm trying to encourage my child to walk. I'm trying to encourage my child to not eat with his hands. So when he does something a little outside the box, do I scold him? What do I do? So he's trying to figure this out, and you could tell, like, all right, I'm a little nervous, but all right, we'll see what happens. I just thought that was fascinating. And Jayden Daniels, clearly, I took it as a positive when he audibled out of that play and threw it to Diami.
Yeah.
It showed me he wasn't afraid. The hit, all right, you got to know when to get down. He says he does. He knows when, but we'll see. But I just thought that was fascinating, that dynamic of how those two, and, because ultimately that is going to be so much of what this season is about. How do those two, factor in Kingsbury too, how do they work this out? Are they on the same page the whole time with these things?
All right, we got two more. Commanders, true or false? Benjamin St-Juste will get at least one interception this season. He's had one interception in 3 years. True or false, he'll get one interception in 2024, at least.
I mean, between the fact that stat and then what Cam Curl just like generated no turnovers. I mean, no wonder their defense struggled when you have two of your guys in the secondary generating no turnovers. It's a problem. I'll say he gets at least one. I will be optimistic on that front. Again, this is a good example of how is this new coaching staff going to deploy these guys for real? Like what we've seen in the preseason does not count completely. I think they'll be, they're going to be way more aggressive with the blitzing. That obviously in turn affects the cornerbacks. And I think in the case of St-Juste, like he was around the ball a fair amount, especially as like I thought his first couple of years. Yeah, but he just, I don't know if it's hands of stone or what, but he just could not catch it. So I think he'll have opportunities, and I say he gets at least one. I'll even go so far as to say he might get two. But
listen, I'm going to say what you can't say. I'm going to say it. I'm going to put it out there. Benjamin St-Juste is the most overrated member of this roster.
Wow.
He is. He is all reputation. It's all reputation. Oh, he's got long arms. It's like, that old, Seattle secondary. Like, what has he done, Ben? What you said he's close. That's what we've been saying for years. Oh, well, he was close. Didn't he? You'll have to fact check me on this. Didn't he give up the most yards in the NFL last year?
I think he was second, according to.
Yeah, he's second.
Yeah.
Second most yards. And of course, you could say, well, Trayvon Diggs one year gave up the most. Yeah, but he got brought it to the house like a million times on the back end. So he was burned like toast repeatedly last season. And you could say coaching, fine. At this point, from production and reputation, if you match them up, he's easily the most overrated member of this team. We all talk about how terrible Forbes is. No one's overrating him. Look at what St-Juste did all season long. And then if you want to go back and well, he was better the year before. Okay, he was maybe not as awful the year before. He's never been good to great. He has never done it. And I want you to show me not just about what he can do. I want you to show me the production because it hasn't been there yet. I keep hearing you yahoos on the radio talking about St-Juste. Oh, well, I think he's good. I just think maybe it was the coaching. Show me what he's done. He's done anything.
I will say also, it's one thing the last couple of years. He's learning. He's this because you had Kendall Fuller over there, right? Not that Kendall Fuller was Deion Sanders, but Kendall Fuller is a totally viable top cornerback. You can feel pretty good, so you can focus on the other side. Well, the reason I think most of us probably feel concerned about the corners, it's not even Emmanuel Forbes, who I think has had a better summer. We'll see, because like you said, we already know where that is. It's because the guy who is being positioned as the top guy is somebody that we still don't know fully what he is. I think that is the reason why ultimately this is a bit of a concern. And it's also why Mikey Sanders still is arguably being viewed as their number one corner as a 5'9" slot guy who hasn't played it down yet.
Now playing on the outside, apparently, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. He may very well. So, I think, again, part of that has nothing to do with St-Juste. He does here, and that's the way, they didn't invest in, signing a free agent or keeping Fuller. So that's the way that broke. But, look, I agree. Look, the people have heard me say many times why I was against the Brandon Ayuk trade. They have so many needs at the main positions that you need on a team other than quarterback. And one of them is cornerback. And if Forbes doesn't turn it around, it's realistically they may need three new outside corners next year. So it's hard to sit here and go, it's good. This is a big year for St-Juste. I mean, he needs to. He's going to his free agent year. This will be the difference between does he get paid as a starter or is he just a guy that starts bouncing around? So I'm with you. It's a lot more of potential than it is reality of what we have seen out of him so far.
Yeah, and we're going into his fourth year. I mean, come on. Enough is enough. All right, listen, it all leads up to this. We got one last one. This is the big money one. True or false, the Commanders will have a winning record in 2024. That means 9 wins, Ben. True or false?
Well, before I answer, where are you at? Because
I'm false. I do not think they will have a winning record. And that could be a good season. It could be a 7-win season that feels really good because he looks great, and the secondary's a nightmare, and the receiving core doesn't look good, and there's still problems on the O-line, and Bobby Wagner lost 2 steps. So I just think we could go 7-10 and still feel good, but I do not have us having a winning record. What about you?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, at the beginning of the summer, and the over/under 6.5 per the odds makers, and I'm not exaggerating. I'm pretty sure I was the only person I knew who was going under, other than Dallas fans. I would hear national reporters go on radio shows or wherever, and they would say, "Oh, I like what they're going here, 9 wins or more." I'm like, look, anything is the NFL, as we know, is weird. Teams go from worst to first, blah blah blah. But when you have the questions that they have at numerous spots, offensive line, offensive playmakers, we just talked about the secondary, the outside pass rush, and a rookie quarterback who is promising as he's a rookie, and the whole staff is new, as good as they may be. I just feel like there's too much there going against them. So I think the one positive is that there is a lot of positive vibes in this place right now, and that can be as big as anything else, at least for a year. It can, not having the clouds over your head can feel like you just got paroled, and that can buoy you in a lot of different ways. But ultimately, I don't have them as a winning record. I think that 6.5 number seems reasonable to me. Maybe they get the 7, but I would probably go under. So again, I view it as they can have a successful season if they're a tough out, especially over the second half of the year, and Jayden Daniels looks the part. If that happens, no matter how many wins they have, I think they're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, as long as he looks decent, and as long as he doesn't get his knee destroyed or something halfway through the season, then I think we can feel good about the season as well. I'm really looking forward to it. Granted, I say that probably every year leading into the season, because always there's some sort of hope that we sort of pin it on.
But that's the thing. Like this year, the ceiling has been removed. There's no,
Yeah.
to go full Kevin Garnett. Anything is possible because officially everything from the last era is gone, minus the name people don't seem to like. I think that's why there's like hope and optimism, and hopefully, I don't tell you root how you want to root, but I think hopefully people will understand all this, and also like understand that Adam Peters, like I said, didn't fully invest in this year. He fully invested in turning around the mentality of the place, and that next year is when they're going to start to go better. So, hang in there, because I don't know that you're going to have the season you want record wise for some of you, but I think better days are ahead based on what I've seen so far.
All right. Of course, we've said that before, but
I haven't said that in a long time. Under I don't know when last time
did you say that when Ron Rivera came aboard? Because think back to that day, we thought, all right, we're not saying he's Vince Lombardi, but he's a stabilizing force. He's really well respected in the league. Players love to play for him. People in the league love him.
But the point, I remember like in talking to people at that, because look, anything sounded more reasonable than what was happening, and he's seemed like an adult. But it was pointed out to me quickly he had losing records in 6 of his 9 seasons at Carolina. Yeah, the 15 in 1 year masked a lot of that, but losing records in 6 of 9 seasons is not good. And then obviously didn't even get one winning record. Here got close, but didn't get over the hump. So
I mean,
plus giving him total control.
So much of that's talent evaluation. Oh, but that's just it. So can you make a case that the Washington Commanders 2023 draft is the worst in NFL history? Like, I'm not saying it is, but is it in the discussion at this point? I think it has to be, right?
Probably not, only because like the Ryan Leaf draft or the DeMarcus Russell draft would have to be viewed higher because it was taking a quarterback with like the first or second pick.
But I'm talking about the totality of the picks.
Sure. No. So like, okay, let's just say for fun, Ron Rivera was still here. Whether these players were good, I would venture to guess almost all of them would still be on the team.
Yes.
Right. Just because that's how this works. Like, none of Adam Peters' players were cut. None of the draft picks were cut. Right. That's kind of how this goes. And then we'll see. So I imagine at least KJ Henry and Chris Rodriguez are probably still here. They probably say, well, Ricky Stromberg was hurt, which is true. I don't know that he's fully recovered from his injury. So that's it. But that said, even last year, like as we were watching it going, boy, like the Jayden Daniels pick, he could have gotten cut last year if he didn't get, put on IR with a shoulder injury. Did he ever have surgery, by the way? I don't know.
Well, the funniest thing is that the guy who now looks like the best of the entire draft is the guy that couldn't even get on the field for the first half of the season as a second round draft pick, Quan Martin.
Yeah. So much went wrong last year. I mean, look, the 2020 class, which had some good players, is completely gone. The 2023, as we know, like if you had said to me before at the start of camp, one of these first round picks is going away, who is it? I would have said Jamin Davis, and it wasn't him. It was the other guy. And it's not like Jamin Davis, like, I don't know, is Jamin Davis going to be active on game days? We'll see. It's we talk so much about the Commanders aspect of it all with Rivera and how, but and a lot of it's like the coaching staff and a lot of things. I think the single biggest mistake he made, it's looking like to me, is he put Marty Hurney essentially in charge. I know that Martin Mayhew was the GM, but I wrote about this at the end of the year. They first hired Hurney, right? And then Mayhew came in a few days later, and it was sort of a weird situation, like who's doing what. And what I reported was, and pretty sure, well, not pretty sure, this is what I was told, and I've heard more since, is that essentially Rivera and Hurney were making the decisions, and Mayhew had a voice, but he was more on the operational side, maybe the guy talking with teams about possible trades, things like that. But Hurney had a big voice in what they did with the picks, and his drafting in Carolina was largely terrible. And obviously here, forget Chase Young. I understand why they picked him, even if we all, they could have taken a quarterback.
Yeah.
The other 3 first-round picks in real time was like, what?
Yeah.
So,
Reaches.
kind of just
All
went from
reaches.
there.
Yeah. Well, this has been fun, dude. This has been fun. Thanks for letting me put you under the microscope.
Look, I know you're into this team and you have good thoughts. And like I said, you are a tremendous interviewer. Before I let you go, we're talking on Friday. I'll probably put this up for Monday and there'll be a Big Brother episode, at least, one
Oh boy.
in between. But like, I just want to say, because whenever I have Dalton on, I get my Big Brother Survivor fix because he's the go-to guy for both of those shows in the media. He's the Adam Schefter of it all.
Huh.
This has been, I don't even know why I keep watching Big Brother at times, not just because it's such a sophomore show, but because it also hasn't been that good as an entertainment piece. I
Fair.
thought this season has been a lot of fun so far. The gameplay is messy, and some of the characters are super over the top, including, unfortunately, spoiler, Tucker, who was just voted out the other day, which was a huge blow. The character Angela is absolutely crazy. And I've enjoyed this season a lot. Now, I don't know what's going to happen now with Tucker out, but you like to rank the seasons. You can't rank it yet, but I mean, I would think you'd have to rank this one pretty high, at least of the more recent vintage.
I love that you called her the character Angela, because she's actually a real person, but she is a character. She's crazy. She's just like the most dramatic, emotional person I've ever seen on reality TV. And that says something, because everyone on reality TV is crazy, dramatic, and emotional. But just to give people an idea of what Big Brother is, and I may have used this example in a previous appearance on your podcast, but I think it's a good illustration of like what we're talking about. So Big Brother is a reality competition show where people in a house and they vote each other out. They do, as you know, these competitions that you see on Survivor, all these other shows where, you can win like immunity. In this case, head of household. They had an immunity, a head of household competition last season that involved, the show had taken footage of whenever the house guests, the contestants, were leaning over to pick something up or do something. And they then ran clips of these people leaning over and then superimposed fluorescent fart gas coming out of their butts, and then ran them in a series of clips. And then people had to remember like what color fart gas came out of whose butt in what order. So that's the level of discourse that we're talking about here when we mention Big Brother, just to give you an idea. So yeah, it's a blessing and a curse, this show, but this season has been very entertaining. The thing about Big Brother, Ben, is that at its heart, it's a comedy. It's a sitcom. It really is. It's a reality show, but like they treat it and they edit it like a sitcom. They make fun of the players. They'll like, do funny bits and editing techniques. And there's some drama as well along the way. And people are voting each other out. So they're in the alliances and they backstab and lie and cheat. And it's been really exciting this season, and they've changed a lot of big format changes that aren't worth getting into here because no one watches and gives a crap. But it's been very well produced for.
I'll
Big
just
Brother.
say quickly, they again, if you're not into Big Brother, you're good. But they added this element this year. They added an extra game element. So there are times in the season that they would do a double elimination. So in 1 hour, 2 people get eliminated, and the second one is very sped up an entire week within the full show. So they don't have a lot of time to make decisions. They have taken up part of that and put it into the show with this thing called the whatever. It doesn't matter what it's called. But they have this, like, it's a very quick game. There's 3 people who are playing in it. Whichever one wins is safe, and then the other 2 are up for elimination. And because they're not giving the contestants much time, it has led to a lot of drama, both in terms of what they have to do, but also for the viewers. Before, we would oftentimes be like, oh, God, we know who's going to go home. This is boring. Now there's much more drama. I think this has got to be one of the best additions to the show they've made in years.
Agreed. Completely agreed. And it's just a crazy show. Just watch 5 minutes of it. You could literally just turn it on and there'll be someone in a weird costume that they were forced to wear. There'll be another person that has to like do weird tasks that make no sense and are humiliating. It's just, you'll become so confused if you put this show on for 5 minutes. I definitely encourage you to do it just to see what a cluster F it is.
Yeah, and of course, go read Dalton's work on this and more weighty material at Entertainment Weekly. Survivor's coming on soon enough, and that's where, of course, Dalton is most notable for his coverage there. My guy, I hit you up with this idea. I really appreciate you coming through. I knew you would do it with enthusiasm and creativity as you did. And, look, we'll have you back on during the season. I think, if for nothing else, like I said, as long as you don't have crazy expectations, I think this should be a fun year because Jayden Daniels, we've been here before. We all understand how the rookie quarterback thing doesn't always work, but I'm optimistic in ways I haven't been about other rookies in some time. And we'll see how this goes.
Well, I appreciate it, Ben, and I encourage anyone else, everyone listening that did not write down Ben's answers on true or false to go back, listen again, write them down, and then send him like really, mean tweets when he's wrong about hopefully at least a few of them.
Hey, Jets fans are doing that now, and I didn't even do anything. All right, my guy, I appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
All right, thanks, Ben. Give my best to the cat.
Deal. All right. Big thanks to Dalton Ross for his time and for prepping to interview me. That was a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Again, more to come here in the coming days as we gear up for week 1, Commanders at Buccaneers, Sunday, 4 o'clock in the heat of Tampa. Should be fun. I will be there for that, but I will be here for you until we get there. So Ben Standig signing off until next time. See ya.